I'd like to call to order this special committee of the whole meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everyone this evening. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind you of your responsibility to do so. Nothing. The next item is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that. Delegations, we have nothing. And finally, we get to the meat of the evening, which is the report of municipal officers or committees, and it's an information report on our organizational review, and it's going to include a presentation by Ward Updegrove Consultants. And Larry can start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council approved funds in the 2015 budget to undertake an update to the 2007 organizational review report. Ward Updegrove was selected as the consultant in May and embarked on the project in mid-June. A comprehensive process ensued through the summer and early fall, including a review of existing materials, identification and review of comparator municipalities, input from staff related to job duties and functions, and supplementary, very comprehensive questionnaires and follow-up interviews with key staff and all elected officials. The process resulted in the preparation of the report that will be presented this evening. The consultants will be in attendance to review the contents with the council in open setting, and further, the meeting has been structured to allow a secondary closed to public component to permit council an opportunity for questions or for clarifications on the contents that might involve an impact to a specific named individual member of staff. From our perspective, Mr. Mayor, it's our intention to review the report, take into consideration any preliminary comments or feedback from Council, and return in early 2016 with responses and a review of the recommendations contained within the document. The consultant has noted the extent of the cooperation and objective input received from all those participating. I would also like to add my appreciation for the feedback that has contributed very positively to the observations and recommendations contained in the document. Senior staff looks forward to undertaking a detailed review of the report and identifying an affordable approach to implementation, taking the priorities identified for future council consideration. And we're pleased to have the two authors of the report in the audience this evening, and the presentation will be conducted by Lindsay tonight.
Welcome, Lindsay, and the podium's yours. The little blue one or a purple one or whatever it is.
Oh, I actually have to push very hard. It's not like a touch. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for having me in this evening, and for the rest of the senior staff that's here and the public as well. As Larry did mention, it's been a long process for the staff and for you all that were part of this project, and so we look forward to sharing what we've come up with in the report, the highlights today, and then further questions in closed session that you may have tonight. Overall, I just want to start by saying we greatly appreciate the time, the effort, the positive contributions of all councillors and all staff in the process. It's been a pleasure working with Saugeen Shores, and we're really looking forward to seeing the impact that our report may have on the town moving forward. So I'll get started here. I'm just going to go over our agenda for this evening. Watch, this isn't going to work. There we go. Oh, it's vibrating. That means something's happening. Yes. Thanks, Jane. So we're going to talk about the project overview, the process we went through, the observations that we made, the key recommendations that we're going to discuss tonight, the organizational charts, more short-term, not long-term, that we're going to recommend implementation of, the next steps and the results and the impact of action and inaction in accepting and moving forward with some of these recommendations. So I'm going to start with the project, the introduction, and the purpose. So, as you know, the senior management team came forward with the desire to go through with an organizational review, and obviously the council wanted to do that as well, and so that's why we are here today. And the main reason to move forward with the review was to make sure that we had sufficient resources moving forward for Saugeen Shores to implement overall strategy and support the community appropriately with their services. So we went through, identified opportunities for efficiencies, and our goal was to build on the organizational strengths as they exist today. I want to make a special note that we are focusing on non-union positions. The unionized employees were not part of our organizational review, and therefore were not included. We did have the opportunity to speak, or not to speak with, but to get information from a few seasonal staff in the harbor and camps. However, all the rest of the seasonal employees were not involved in the collection of data. And the other thing to note too is, as we go through this, we're really focusing on the position and not the people in those positions as we go through with the recommendations. So you may find yourself connecting specific positions to people, but overall we're really looking at the positions and their structure themselves, if that makes sense. Okay, so our process, as Larry mentioned in his introduction, was the collection of job information questionnaires and also additional questionnaires from senior management team, key staff, and from all of the councillors sitting here today. And that led to the follow-up interviews with all of those parties as well that completed those additional questionnaires. From there, I got to go on several tours of the town, which included a tour with the Director of Community Services and the Supervisor of Parks and Recreation, as well as the Director of Public Works and the Fire Chief as well. So I got to see the vast amenities that the community has to offer, and it gave me a good overview of how everything operates and what the service is and what this community is all about. So that was much to my benefit and certainly allowed me to get to know the community better. We looked at the 2007 organizational review report as well, and I did a comparison where we were then, what's changed, and what we need to update, and how the environment has changed, and what the impact is on the staff and the community as a whole. We did some comparative analysis with data collected from our comparator municipalities. We had a total of 7 municipalities that provided their information. I will say that, with comparative data, it's difficult because every municipality does operate slightly different. So some of that comparison is challenging. However, I think we've incorporated some of that data to help you have a good understanding of what some of the other municipalities are doing. Pulled all that information together for the analysis, and then arrived at the report that you have in front of you today. So I know it's a long 40-page report, so thank you for reading that. I'm sure most of you have read it in full by now, and I'm sure you have lots of questions based on that. So some key observations, I've already talked about how I had the opportunity to see the community and recognizing its vast geographic advantages with the waterfront, the trail systems, everything that you have to offer in this community. And, recreation, it's a recreation and leisure hub at this point. And that extends to the two communities, Port Elgin and Southampton, and each with their own unique and distinct features that make it special. So, a really unique community. An engaged community as well. So you see that with the service group involvements, the resident involvement, and the business involvement across the board. Very engaged and interested community in how the organization moves forward. With that all comes increased public expectations, and that's something that I think all of you identify, that there is that expectation of increased, whether it's needs or maintenance expectations, whatever it may be across the board, and it was certainly echoed by staff. So across the board, there was that identification that expectations are increasing. Saugeen Shores economy, obviously you know this, your vast amount of the economy is supported by Bruce Power, and that seems to be something that's going to sustain you into at least the medium-term future, long-term future. Increasing number of young families and retirees, that's certainly unique to your community. That's not existent in all communities, so that's a unique feature. And of course, the fastest growing community in Bruce County, and that's been sustained over a significant period of time now, so that's continued. And of course, it's important to note that, compared to other municipalities, you do have a comparably lower tax increases over time. And so, that's something to note and that we have observed. Overall organizational observations, as far as getting things done and meeting legislative requirements, you are in a very good position that way. We saw no significant red flags, so that was excellent to see. I think all of your staff are very diligent in understanding and knowing the legislation that impacts each of their departments, so it's important to note that. Also, that staff go above and beyond the required day-to-day duties. They work very hard here, and I was very impressed with how much they're committed and their passion for the organization is as a whole. Also, you have some excellent technical expertise. You can see that in many of the departments. In the Public Works Department, I'll pick on for a quick moment, in that they've really developed expertise in their department with the specialized positions that they have there, which is unique and not something you see in all communities. Focus and execution on day-to-day operations. I think that day-to-day operations are run very well with the resources that you have available. So I think the services are provided in as efficient way as possible, given the resources that you have allocated right now. Partnerships within the community and that have really increased community amenities and attractions over time. So that's certainly something that I recognized as I went and saw all the parks and trails and systems, that the community partnerships are strong and very interested in investing in the municipality, and then the municipality in turn, Saugeen Shores, needs to support that. And finally, the last point I'll make about just the overall organizational observations was that a visioning exercise was completed in 2015, in which you outlined, 10 priorities, project priorities, and 10 planning priorities. However, there's not been an overall strong strategic plan for the organization, and I think that's something we'll keep touching on throughout the presentation today. So I will continue on. Our findings about the organization: it's a typical traditional structure which is flat and functional. So there are 6 departments as they stand today, and then the CAO, so 7 senior management team members at this time. And each of those focuses in on their areas of expertise. So that's something that we've seen in history with municipalities and how they operate. So that's fairly typical. There are some, most managers, if not all managers, are overworked, and they really have the ability to focus on the day-to-day tasks, but they're not having the ability to focus on those strategic high-level initiatives. So again, that's something that we'll come back to throughout the presentation today, and something that we recommend should be focused on. Workflow and process opportunities. These exist in every organization, and certainly that is no exception here. There is opportunity to streamline processes, use technology to your advantage, and there's some examples of that, which I'm happy to expand on later on, but overall there's some opportunities there. Communication and engagement with public and your opportunities there. Certainly with those increased expectations we talked about earlier, there is the increased need to communicate with the public and provide them with the resources to educate themselves on the municipal processes. So communication is, again, a trend too that we're seeing across other municipalities, in that they're implementing positions that take care of communications across the board. Management and staff development opportunities. This is certainly the case when it comes to change management, leadership, succession planning, processes and process mapping. There's lots of opportunity for development in the organization. And finally, the opportunity for strategically guided operational initiatives. And so that means starting from the top, having a strategy, and then being able to operationalize those strategies in each of your departments, which would, I think, help to organize work, to identify future priorities, and to move forward in a more organized fashion overall. So I'm just going to speak briefly before I get into the recommendations and what those impacts are on your current staff. So we are not recommending a reduction in the staff complement. However, we are recognizing some realignment of job duties and workflow changes. So obviously that has some impact on the staff that you have in those positions. But overall, we are adding key positions to address the evolving needs of the organization. That is our overall recommendation. So we have more than 3 main priorities and main recommendations. However, without these 3 being the focus of the organization moving forward, I think the future evolution of the organization would be stunted. So we outline these 3 in the report, and I'll go over them now. The first being a strategic focus, and that means council and senior management coming together and focusing on a strategic planning process and getting a guideline document in place that can be operationalized by the senior management team in the future. So that is our first priority that we're recommending. Resource allocation. So as I mentioned in the report, and I will speak to it here, we are recommending approximately 8 full-time equivalents, the addition of, as well as the investment in information technology. And that simply is to support the evolution and the opportunity for senior managers to focus on those strategic initiatives. And then there's some shift in accountability of organizational activities, and we'll see that as we go through the presentation today on where we recommend some of those significant shifts happen. And without the investment in training and tools to support the changes in resource allocation and the strategic focus, I think the organization will struggle to move forward. And so it's important that you focus on the skills development of your staff, and that's at all levels of the organization, but particularly with your key staff. Change management will be key in understanding change management and having the skills to move forward. Leadership, and of course process improvements, and being able to identify how to proceed with process improvements. So hopefully you can see some of this, but it is in your report. I've added some additional information onto the bottom of each slide for the purposes of this presentation, just so you know some of the additional accountabilities that are going to be included in each department. So you see up here a change in the overall high-level structure of the organization, particularly on the left-hand side with the addition of the communications coordinator. I apologize, it is hard to see up there. And the marketing and communications assistant as well. And those positions for the future plan, we want to focus on organizational communication strategy. So overall, making sure that we have a consistent message that goes out, that goes along with the marketing strategy, ensuring that it's consistent across the organization, it's supporting all departments as opposed to being focused in one department. And also the support of economic development overall is essential in that role. You can also talk about the responsibility for policy development around those areas of expertise. So overall, that's the purpose of those 2 positions in the organization. You will see across the bottom, we've stayed consistent with the 6 departments that originally existed, and we recommend moving forward with those in the short term, and we'll talk about the long term a little bit later. On the right-hand side, you'll see the addition of a health and safety and human resources assistant. And the purpose of this position is to support the human resources officer on strategic initiatives moving forward. And currently there is a part-time person holding the health and safety accountabilities. However, we believe that it is important for a full-time person to be in that role to support the human resources of the organization. This will become particularly important if you are moving forward with many of those changes. In addition, we see this accountability in the human resource role to work at a higher level, focusing on policy development, consistency in implementing those policies across the organization. Training and development will also be under the responsibilities of these roles. In the clerk's department, it's the same structure we're recommending you move forward with as exists today. There is some capacity in this department, and we believe that can be filled with the addition of cemetery administration, as well as the assistance with land use agreements that's currently being taken on by the community services department. And overall, it's consistent with comparator information as well. So this department is is staffed appropriately and can take on a little bit more work. Community Services Department. So this department sees the most significant changes. And so I would like to spend some time to go over that. And we can go back to it at the end if you have questions. You'll see in green highlighted, which is consistent with all the slides, additional, whether it's additional resources or a change in responsibilities for positions. So it doesn't mean we're necessarily adding 5 positions here. You're actually adding 3 positions to this department, but 5 would be adjusted in some way total. So we've split up the accountabilities into 3 areas: operations, activities, or you could call it recreation and culture, and the business responsibilities of this department. So it's unique in that it has a very deep amount of services that it needs to provide to the public. So what we've done is added 3 managers to this position. So we're reducing the number of direct reports from 4 to 4 from 7. So Community Services Director currently has 7 direct reports as it exists today. And so this will allow the opportunity for, again, that higher level strategic focus as is consistent across the organization for all directors. So we'll start on the left-hand side with the operational responsibilities. So we're suggesting that, the maintenance duties of this department are focused under the manager of operations. That includes facilities maintenance, parks and trails maintenance. However, it does not include the maintenance of downtown or the maintenance of the beaches, and we'll talk about that under Public Works and transitioning those pieces to the Public Works Department. Again, it's the maintenance of those, not necessarily the recreation, culture, relationships, building opportunities at those areas. In addition here, there's capital projects and construction responsibilities, preparation of venues, and we're adding a cemetery maintenance under this group as we're considering it a park. And that is a transition that can happen over time from the Public Works Department. As far as the middle section is concerned, we are we're adding a manager there as well, and recommending that this manager be responsible for the programming of aquatics and any other programs that the community takes on, the bookings of all venues, the tourism and culture and events, whether it's activities or relationships or whatever it may be. This person's very much a relationship builder or will need to be in that role. Department Health and Safety will fall under this manager. And the opportunity for corporate training delivery possibilities. So what that means is building on any expertise that you have in-house and utilizing that, but that does not mean corporate training, scheduling, and overall accountability. It's just they may be able to deliver some of those corporate training services. So I just wanted to be clear on that. And finally, the addition of a business manager. So there are a lot of business enterprises that the town holds right now, specifically with the camps and the harbor. And so this position will be responsible for, again, not the maintenance of those, but the operations of those services, as well as airports, any agreements, whether they're land use agreements or private land owners' responsibilities and communication, and the addition of departmental analysis. And so basically what we're saying is there needs to be more support. Welcome. There needs to be more support administratively in this role, and sorry, I could have squeezed in there a bit for you, to provide some of that analysis overall that can affect future strategic changes in this department. So that's the role of that position. Public Works Department, I apologize, this is so gray. When I translated it, it didn't work so kindly for me today. So you will see the addition of 2 roles here, technical coordinator, and I want to be clear that there's no definition in totality for that role right now, but in fact it is the addition of a mid-level support role. So that could be defined further by the Public Works Director as something different, but what we want to make sure is that there's administrative support at a high level here that can focus in on analysis, the preparation of tenders, some inquiries, ratepayer inquiries, and again, relieve those day-to-day activities from the Public Works Department and support the managers and Public Works at working at a higher level. You also see the addition of a GIS specialist. This is something that has been wanting to be recommended for a while now, and as GIS is starting to be used across the organization and not specifically in this department. So to support that, you will need the additional resources for this position. And then, of course, the addition, as I mentioned, under community services of downtown maintenance and beach maintenance is going to be under the operations manager role. And so the impacts of that are yet to be seen and what that will create. Finance department, changes here. We've added in the asset management position and information technology coordinator role. And there's a few reasons for this. Asset management has been recommended as or identified as a priority of council moving forward. And so this position will help support asset management in all departments across the organization. And then from an IT perspective, we need the strategic perspective on IT. Right now, you're able to keep up with the maintenance and the day-to-day. However, the strategic piece is not there. So coordinating that the strategy of IT implementation across the organization is important. So that's our recommendation there. There's also the opportunity for corporate-wide procurement and ensuring that that is taken care of corporately. Okay. The one other thing to note in this department is just that the Deputy Treasurer will now directly manage many of the staff in this department as opposed to all employees going to the Director of Finance. Building and Development Department, you'll notice there's not a lot of changes here. Despite what it looks like on the screen, the bylaw enforcement officer is slightly green. Very slightly, and what we're recommending by that is moving that position to a full-time position. That is something that's consistent with your comparators, all but one. And so our recommendation is to move to a full-time bylaw enforcement officer. Overall in this department, though, it is a new department. It's only been implemented in the last 3 years, so we recognize there's still efficiencies that can be developed over time and moving forward. So what we would suggest is as you move forward, you assess the requirement to add additional staff based on the council priorities in these areas of planning, building, development. Okay. Fire department, we're recommending an additional 1.5 employees. You'll see 2 up there. You do have an administrative assistant currently that is part-time admin assistant for fire department and part-time health and safety. So we're recommending that the fire department has full-time administrative support there and a full-time training officer. Again, very consistent with your comparators. You're significantly below what the comparators provide in this department currently. And you also have the benefit of not having any full-time fire staff. You have an excellent group of volunteers that are committed, which is fantastic. But they need to be supported, and that's where the recommendation of 1.5 employees comes. There's also opportunity, again, for building on the strengths of the people in this department on some possible corporate training delivery options there, as opposed to using external provider. If you have the internal providers and skills available, they could be used in the training opportunities. Okay. So that's the end of the organizational chart changes in the short term again. I will speak to the long term a little bit later. So we recognize that this is a significant investment of council that we are requesting and recommending. The total is an increased staff count of 8.2 full-time equivalents, which equals approximately $533,000. So that's significant. That is in 2015 base salaries, I will say that. So that you'll have to increase that by the cost of living adjustment or the overall adjustment that you decide on as a council. Works out to about 6.18% increase from the current complement that you have right now. Additional expenses will be an investment in staff development. That will be key. There may also be some consulting fees related to strategic planning, process improvement, if you do go ahead with some of these recommendations. There's also the potential to increase union and any other support resources that may be required in the organization. As I mentioned, non-union employee or unionized employees were not included in our review, so the impact to them will need to be assessed and monitored by the senior management team. And we are unaware of what those impacts may be at this time. Human resource costs, so of course related to training and development, which I already mentioned, but also recruitment and selection of key staff, even understanding what your current complement of human resources is right now and documenting that. So additional resources from an HR perspective, an investment in IT infrastructure and training. So that's something that's been on the agenda moving forward as far as goals of the organization with the IT master plan, but implementing some of those things will cause some, will create some investment and increase in resources overall for implementation. So there may be a period of adjustment where you have to delegate some more resources in the short term to get you through the recommendations. Okay, I'm going to talk about long-term opportunities here for the organization. Certainly, of course, there's always room for process improvements. A review of facilities and their capacity to suit future staffing is a necessity. You always need to be doing that. And I will note that the 2007 report recommended the consolidation of the Public Works two departments, or not two departments, but the two facilities. And we do recommend, that that's something that the council looks to in the future as something they could move to. Organizational structure. I'm just going to talk about general trends in the municipal environment right now. So what we are seeing is the consolidation of departments and less senior management team focused in strategically on the organization. I think that is a direction that Saugeen Shores should consider in the future and look to. The reason why we didn't recommend it in the short term is there has to be an alignment between that and organizational strategy. And so we recommend focusing in on organizational strategy first to then look to a future organizational structure that will support that strategy effectively. So that's why you didn't see a huge change at the senior management team level and the resources allocated there. Exploring service delivery alternatives, whether that's shared services, outsourcing services, new service opportunities. This is something that should continue to be explored. As I mentioned, you have a lot of technical expertise at Saugeen Shores, and with that becomes the opportunity not only to share services, but also you may be contracted for in the future by smaller municipalities. There's opportunities there for you, and so exploring those with neighboring municipalities is something that you could look to in the future, and utilizing the strengths that you have in-house elsewhere. So those are the long-term opportunities that we outline in further detail in the report. So next steps, of course, acceptance of this report. Moving to and through a strategic planning process is, again, our number one priority. And then senior management needs to develop an implementation plan for council approval in the short term, 12 months, and then work forward in the future. And so we do recommend that, based on council's direction, that senior management moves forward with an implementation plan that's acceptable and, as Larry mentioned, affordable as well. Overall, we hope that our recommendations and our observations will allow the organization to move forward with strategic direction and focus. The recommendations should increase employee engagement, morale, and retention across the board. We believe that it will you will be able to build on the cross-departmental collaboration and communication that you have currently. I know the senior management team spoke very highly about their interactions with each other, so I think that you will see an increase in that as well. Increased community engagement. I think that's something that's desired by your public and by you. So we see the benefits of the new structure supporting that. We can see a forward-thinking and proactive management team that will definitely benefit the organization. And, of course, process improvement and efficiencies. If you have the time to invest in those things, then you will see the results there. I'm going to talk briefly about the risks of inaction, which are just, most of them are simply the negatives or the opportunity for negatives if you don't implement the results and that we recommended or that we suggested in the last slide. So a lack of strategic direction and focus is a possibility. Decreased employee engagement and morale and retention. Reduced communication and collaboration cross-departmentally, and so you'll see more competing for resources as opposed to working together to support the organization properly. Employee burnout. Certainly workplace stress is a trend in every organization and something that you need to be aware of. Public dissatisfaction with services. The more dissatisfied, the more complaints, and the higher the work volume on that end as well. Inability for management to focus on strategic and proactive priorities. Again, it's important that they do focus on that high level and have the opportunity to do so. And then lack of innovation, efficiency, and effectiveness. So not ideal in any town. So I think that moving forward with some of these recommendations will help support the desired results that you're looking for as an organization. So at this time, I would like to open the floor to any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. So I guess we'll start for some questions or clarifications. Or if there's none. Oh, Councillor Mike Myatt.
That $533,000 you talked about in 8 positions, and I'm assuming that would not include benefit packages, drug, dental, et cetera, all those benefit packages. The 533 is strictly the wage amount, correct?
Yeah, you're correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Page 1 of the flow chart, I'm not sure if it's correct or not, but go back to page 1, you've got Director of Recreation and Culture. Should that be Director of Community Services and a new position you're recommending? Manager of Recreation and Culture. Like I saw in the flow chart right at the beginning, you had Director of Finance, Director of Public Works, Director of there's 6 directors, but the Director of Community Services wasn't listed. Oh, I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah. One second, I'm just going to take
back to slide 1. But anyways, it was just.
I think you're correct. Yes, so that would be that's an error on our part. So yes, it says Director of Recreation and Culture, and later on here it says Director of Community Services.
I realize that slide's correct, but right at the beginning.
Yes, that's what I.
Should be Director of Community Services, correct?
I should go back to the report and what it recommends.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's not a new position. It is on here. I think it was just it's just named improperly on one of the slides because then there's a Manager of Recreation and Culture underneath there.
Just so for clarity, that position on page 7, which says Director of Community Services, is really one of those directors that will be of the 7 that you have at
Correct.
the bottom of page 3. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering about the allocation of HR services. There's an area in there that wasn't mentioned, but it is mentioned in the broader report, and that is with regard to the fact that at present the municipality is providing human resources support to police services as an outside organization, and there was some comment about that in the report, but no real resolution. And I wonder, is a resolution, or is it something that you think requires resolution, or is the current arrangement acceptable? And if it isn't acceptable, what might replace it?
Yeah. So we have identified that an additional 0.5 resources should be allocated to human resources overall. And the recent shift of payroll services into the finance department has freed up some space there. So I think the support of police services could continue. However, I think that it's something that needs to be looked in as far as how much time is supporting police services and making some allocation decisions in the future on that. I don't think it's something that you need to adjust currently.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a couple of high-level, I guess, easy ones, and then I'd like to drill in a little later if opportunity allows for it. So strategically, you've used the terms recreation and culture manager, business manager, manager of operations, roads and water operations manager, manager of services. So why did we flip the manager from being in front to being at the back end of a title? That would be a question. And then another one is about asset management.
Mm-hmm.
So I better read it so I can get it right. When you did your research for us, I'm having a hard time with presentation of asset management. We're all talking about it, we all know about it, and yet it's hard to quantify it. Mm-hmm. Where are we with our asset management? Could you find that out in your research? Mm-hmm. What percentage of completion to a mature 100% asset management system are we currently at? How long will it take us to get there? Mm-hmm. And are any of these positions, I believe you've got positions here clearly that are going to help advance the asset management plan. So they're full-time employees, so they can't be temporary, but if we get to a mature asset management plan, then will they be necessary to sustain it at that level? So that's another question. Mm-hmm. You talk about there's still a split with harbor operations and harbor maintenance. And for me, I felt that I was hoping for something aligned differently, like tourist camps, harbors, airports, downtowns, tourism added together in a group. Was there a particular reason why you thought that you didn't want to go that route? And I recognize that it's moved to the Director of Public Works for beach maintenance.
Neil, if I might, I mean, you've got a number of questions, and I think just to try and keep it all on track, why don't we try and deal with them as they go along? So everybody, if you don't mind, because because I've kind of lost you there at the first one already. So just start again. Now make sure that, have you got?
I'm good.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands what's being discussed.
Okay, so I'll address the titles first, and just whether manager is at the beginning of a title or at the end of the title. I don't think we were that strategic in identifying what goes where at this point. However, I think as if the council does decide to go through with the second stage of the process with this, which is a compensation review, we could look at creating those consistencies then, but it is simply a title change, not a responsibility change of any sort. So I would speak to that. Asset management percentage, I think that would require a little bit more digging, but overall, what I would say is asset management seems to be in a good place as far as public works is concerned and the assets there. However, that's not something that's been ruled out in any other. There's I'm sure a plan in place, and again I'm going to defer to the senior management team here. However, it's not accounted for properly, especially from a technological perspective. So having it documented in your asset management programs and systems is not done at this point. Mm-hmm.
So for example, is a Zamboni replacement program in community services? What you're telling me is the community services department does not have an asset management plan that says when the next Zamboni should be replaced?
I can't answer that question. I think that's for those departments.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Community Services Department has a comprehensive fleet replacement program that includes Zambonis. A different question to the consultants and staff might be, do we have enough information in community services dealing with built facilities? And the answer to that is no, it's a work in progress.
And I think there was a third question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead then.
Yeah, just the why the split from a community services perspective and maintenance and operations, and then the recreation and culture, and that's convenient that it's up on the slide right now, and then the business side of things. And what we did was we track the workflow and how things are being done. And the most efficient way to organize the department is how we've recommended here. We recognize, though, that community engagement and connection and thinking of things from a business perspective is important. And the Director of Community Services, with less direct reports and more support and resources in that department, will be able to focus on that and bringing those three areas together to ensure that the businesses are being operated properly in that department.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you. Hi, Lindsay. In the report, it talked about the fact that the harbor, I think that some communities are repurposing their harbor.
Yeah.
In
Sure.
consist of.
Absolutely. Carrie, do you mind speaking to that? No, I just know that she knows a lot more, so I'm going to put her on the spot here.
I'm not sure about repurposing. That was the word that was used in the report.
Sorry about that. Because that is a dying sport to some degree at this point in time, and repurposing would have referred to using the harbor for possibly walkers, trails, other purposes, rather than just, fueling up for boats and bringing people in from the lake.
The waterfront development.
Yeah, waterfront development. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of other questions. In the current slide, under the business responsibilities for the business manager, I think in several places you talked about recommending that land use agreements go from this to the clerk's department,
Yes.
but
It's still there.
it's still there.
Okay. So yeah, absolutely. I figured that question would come.
Okay.
Many of the user agreements, there's that relationship piece there. So we would like to utilize the relationship piece that the Community Services Department has developed. But as far as the preparation of those documents and supporting that process, the Clerk's Department would have responsibility in that.
I have a question that maybe Larry might be able to answer. I'm not sure, but one of the recommendations was adding to employees to the fire department, and one of the justifications was the fact that because of our proximity to Bruce Power, we have that whole nuclear emergency area that other municipalities don't have. And is that possible? Does Bruce Power provide some funding for us to deal with that? Two more questions, if I may. They're short. The proposed strategic planning session for council and staff, how long? I mean, is this like a weekend-long, day-long? These mission, vision, value things can get pretty lengthy. Just wondering.
That is a fair question. I can't express that I am a guru in strategic planning and management. However, is it a process? Absolutely. Is it important to do it right? Absolutely. And so therefore I think that it would, resources, yes, but time, absolutely. An investment in your time is also going to be required. So I can't say what that process would look like, but I would say it's something that you want to invest properly in so that you do get the right organization or person facilitating that exercise for you, so you end up with a usable document at the end of the day. Usability is going to be essential for implementing those.
And buy-in.
Yeah, and
Right.
buy-in, 100%. And again, bringing the both senior management and council to the table and will very much assist with that. Yeah.
One last question, and this is probably for Jane, but the report says that our aquatics program utilizes the waterfront. Sorry, how do we do that?
We have summer programs at the waterfront for about 7 weeks out of the summer. Not so much swimming lessons, more of a life-saving capacity.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. What?
Councillor Dave Mayap.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize for coming in late, but I did take the time to read this before earlier today, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind. And those were good questions. I had a couple of the same ones, so I'm going to cut it down to 2 questions. One is around the implementation, and it was on the overhead slides, which I don't think we got the slide presentation. We got the full 40-page document plus the org charts. So on the information side, it said that the first step would be council acceptance. Staff would go away and come up with an implementation plan. By acceptance, you mean council will receive the report. Some of us, depending on our backgrounds, have more or less familiarity with the actual interworkings of the departments and things, and then, you know, like Mike, for instance, used to work in the town, so he knows quite well, whereas myself, it's all kind of new to me, and so I wouldn't be in a position where I'd feel comfortable saying, yes, this is a change we should make, or this is not a change we should make, without having staff come back and say, this makes sense because of these reasons, and this will work, and this won't work, and that sort of thing. So really, it's just us saying, we receive your report, and I'm hoping that staff is going to go away and have the senior staff certainly have a workshop to come up with what parts of this, because I don't believe it's going to be but there's certainly some gems in there, and I read it, and I said, yeah, these are some things that make really good sense. Okay, and the last slide you put up there was on kind of the risks of not implementing it, and some of the things like community engagement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we do these organizational reviews from time to time as a matter of best practice, that it's a good idea to every 5 or 6 years, or wherever the interval is, to review your organization just to make sure you're current and you're keeping up with what everybody else is doing, and as technologies change and things. And so we undertook this process with you folks as a matter of process, rather than because we had identified disengagement or lack of morale or things like that, because I don't believe necessarily all of those things exist in our community and our organization. I think we have some really good strengths and some really good community relations, and you mentioned in your report, you know, how our fire department is highly engaged and those types of things. So I don't think, to me, when I read that, I thought, well, you know, it's looking like we're in really bad shape, and if we don't do something, we're going to be on a slippery slope into a worse condition. But I think, you know, we're in good shape, but tweaking certainly would help, and to bring us to the best performing municipalities out there. So that's wasn't really a question.
No answer.
Rich.
Yes, thank you for the report. So I've just got a couple of quick kind of little housekeeping questions, because whenever we look at stuff like this, it immediately goes down to dollars, and we're like, okay, who wants to spend another $533,000? So currently we have a GIS specialist, right, that's on contract position, so that wouldn't really play into the 533 because we're already spending that money. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, no, because he's doing a mat leave. So in fact, we only have funding for one person.
Position.
So this would be an additional burden on the tax rate.
Okay. And then secondly, I'm going to use this for the training officer position because I'm familiar with fire, but it could work in a couple other instances as well. So in your correspondence with, say, the fire chief and other staff members that had involvement in emergency services, did you see a deficiency? Was a deficiency in training explicitly stated, and that was the need, or is this comparable to other communities? Is this why we think that we need an additional training officer? Because I know that we currently have a system in place that, as far as I understand, is working quite well.
So certainly, yes, we looked at comparator municipalities, and then we also spoke with the fire chief here to ask about resources. So I did look at the master fire plan as well, and as far as hours that your current staff complement of 2.5 are putting on is significantly above, and would more than support the addition of that 1.5 complement. Like all of the recommendations in this report, I think that there's opportunity to define those roles and input other accountabilities into those positions. So while I say training officer in general, there may be other opportunities for that training officer to be training officer plus this, or have other responsibilities that's not just the training officer. So what I'm saying is they don't have to be defined as we've defined them, that there's opportunity for flexibility in job descriptions and the creation of those roles and what their accountabilities are. Does that make sense?
Councilor Minaj.
Okay, thank you. So I have three more, then I will make a comment similar to Councillor Mayette, I think. So the business manager here, if I read the responsibilities, I'm thinking 8 or 9 months, and I'm wondering what they're going to do for the rest of the year. So maybe you could explore on that and add the thought about planning and grants. Applying for grants is a big thing, and it takes a lot of hard work, and I don't remember seeing how that fleshes out there. Mm-hmm. If it's moving, if it's shifting, if it's mm-hmm. part of a new position. So planning, strategic planning for annually, like an annual plan that says somebody should be purchasing this truck by this date, that we can all see a strategic plan, some document like that. I thought that maybe there's an opportunity for, at least in that department, for a business manager to work on some planning sheets that we could all review. Anyway, that's a comment, I guess, more than a question, unless you saw it. The fire chief has already demonstrated some amazing talent at fleet management and moving pieces around and efficiencies and reducing costs. Was there ever any consideration that maybe he should inherit the whole fleet and wave his magic wand over everything? Because I think he should, and I think I'd like to pursue that as an option. And communications. Back to the. Can we go back to the slide that talks about the person or persons who are going to suddenly be responsible for controlling all the communications of the municipality? How does that strategically work? So that person's going to work with the mayor and the CAO independently and be a one-stop shopping. So everything the mayor knows and everything that the CAO knows will funnel through the corporate communications officer, who will then make sure everybody else knows on a need-to-know basis. Sure. Can you answer those?
Okay. So.
And I have one comment afterwards.
Okay. Okay, so why don't I start at the end and work my way back?
Yeah.
If that's okay. I'll do my best. You may have to remind me. So because the communications slide is up now, I'll speak to that. I think that yes, could it be a funnel of it for information? Yes. What we are saying is we are not creating the job description for this role. Identifying that a position should exist in the organization is what we're doing. And
you heard enough feedback that you're suggesting that should be there.
Enough feedback and enough comparator information as well.
All right.
Certainly is the case, and more recently with the trends of organizations that have done organizational reviews, you're seeing that position a lot. The marketing and overall, it's not just communications, but economic development and marketing as well in that role could be a large accountability. So as far as that's concerned, yes, it could be a funnel for mayor information and CAO information and that sort of thing. But that person will work at a high level to ensure that all of the departments are being serviced properly. So it's an internal service provider is what it is in those areas of expertise.
Oh, sorry. Follow up then. It's internal. It's not somebody who would communicate one-stop shopping externally.
Both. So I was just saying that it's not just helping the mayor and the CAO, but it will also be an internal service provider for all of the department heads. In addition, marketing, social media, everything that goes out will be controlled through that position. Policy development and creation surrounding that, I would assume in conjunction with the clerk's department, will be an essential duty of that job as well.
Okay, so the other
term really should be council and CAO, not mayor. Clear.
Fair enough. Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
Maybe that's a Freudian slip on my part. So following up, the other two were the business manager. In the 9 months, it seemed like it was all summer seasonal. And so is there opportunities for that person? Obviously, there's opportunities for that person if we're going to develop that role to do something in those other months. And the last one was, did you consider the fire chief for the fleet management role?
Okay, so the business manager, absolutely, are there opportunities for grant writing and those sort of administrative support tasks and strategic looks at things? Absolutely, there is. Perhaps it's something that we missed as far as the opportunity for overall accountabilities here. What we're saying is we need to add resources in the community services department to help at all levels, and so could the business manager be responsible for grant writing and that sort of thing? 100%. We did not define the job descriptions in their totality, just a general accountabilities there. So that could be something that has increased.
So with respect to your comments and my fellow councillors' comments about the discovery of morale and the effect, can you answer the question, after all your research, did you find a morale problem here in Saugeen Shores with the staff and council, and so on and so forth? Can you define that, or are you just warning us that it could permeate if we don't do something?
I think that depends on your definition of a morale issue. I will commend the staff and the councillors on their commitment and passion for the organization. So what I will say is that is not lost yet in the people that are here. The indications of low morale is more what we look at as HR professionals. So I think that you need to look at turnover and perhaps implement things like an engagement survey or something to define that in its in actuality, whether you have a problem or not. I think it's unfair for me to speak to that in its full based on that.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Mayor, I think our Director of Community Services does an amazing job of fleet management, and I certainly wouldn't be in support of that moving anywhere, but Public Works, I think that's a job they do extremely well and should remain there. Larry, I have a question about the fire department and, on the training officer end of things. Could you explain to me just briefly who's been doing that then? Like, we've got a fire prevention officer, and I confess I don't know about the workloads in that particular department. I don't know how busy our fire prevention officer is, Phil. I confess I'm not really. But who has been doing the training of our volunteer firefighters?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's been a combination of the chief, the 2 station chiefs, and programs that have been borrowed from the peer group as well. I think Lindsay mentioned in passing that she's looked at the fire master plan, and this is one small step towards implementing the staff complement that the Fire Master Plan recommended a few years ago. And from our perspective, it's an incremental step that's really important that will relieve some of the obligations on the chief and further evolve the emergency planning stuff that we are under some pressure to produce and keep current.
So, as a follow-up to that, as part of the study with the fire prevention officer position, was there any consideration at all given to if the fire administration emergency planning position became full-time?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any thought given around creating some additional responsibilities for the fire prevention officer and the fire administration emergency planning officer position, I should say, that were as an interim as an interim step, rather than moving to training officer right away? Was there any thought about seeing how that would work with that, like creating that position full time, go from half to full, and through the fire prevention position? Was there any thought about as an interim step to perhaps build duties through that training officer position that's not there right now, but was there any thought given around that?
I'm not going to say no, but what I will say is that I think the amount of additional workload that the fire chief and the fire prevention officer are currently putting in, and the items that they aren't getting to or being as proactive on as they could be if they had additional resources, have led us to the understanding that additional 0.5 would not be sufficient to support the services that are required in that department.
Okay. In my final question then, the 2007 Weingart report, mm-hmm. which you reviewed, and you've highlighted through your report, can you just quickly, how have we done since 2007? Have we made good progress? Have we done anything with the plan? I mean, I read the report, but we've done some things. But in your view, how well have we done since 2007 with implementing his recommendations?
So I do outline this in detail in the report. I think the highlights, again, if I go through this again because that's off the top of my head, but the implementation of an HR officer was a significant move that would support the organization. The creation of the development and building services department, again, it wasn't the exact implementation that was recommended by the 2007 Weingart report, but certainly a move in the right direction to support those services to the public. However, the changes in community services didn't happen then. Additional complements he projected into the future a little bit on what would be required, and those haven't been implemented. Most haven't been implemented. I perhaps maybe would draw on the CIO's expertise as far as any additional. I'm sure I'm missing a few things here, but
one was engineering services too that was recommended that we created. Was another. I think at one time, well, it was a step in the right direction, and where we're there. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I struggle a little bit with the way that you've divided the recommendation into almost two different recommendations in terms of the final structure, which is ideal, right? I mean, you've got a complete structure. You add 8.5 full-time equivalents, and you end up where you are with that large org chart. But then, in addition, you say that's really not ideal to where you might want to end up. Everybody else, or not everybody else, but many of our comparators are moving toward a smaller senior management team, more consolidated, and then a broader second level of management. And so then I struggle with that because if you build that out, if you implement what you've recommended for immediate implementation or short-term implementation, and you do that, you sort of hem yourself in on doing what you're suggesting is ultimately ideal, right? I mean, you make it more difficult to do that because you've got a bunch of good people in good positions, and it's very difficult from a human resources standpoint. I suspect, and you're the human resources expert, I'm not, but I expect that knowing what I know is going to be difficult to do and potentially very long term because of that, right? Because you're waiting for staff turnover and attrition, yada, 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 to get that done. So I just wonder, is it really ideal to implement what you're suggesting, to fully implement that, if it's taking us to a place where it isn't ideal to be, or are we better to target the long-term goal, maybe more in the short term, and try to align ourselves to get there? I just wonder if you could talk a bit about it, the strategy maybe at a high level, how a council gets itself to that ideal position that you've identified at the end of your report, while making sure that we're addressing the immediate needs that we need to address to keep the place running well and effectively for the community.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I would say is that you need more support resources at the mid-management level and administrative level. 100% right now, today, you need to look at those. As far as a future, you're right, that in an ideal world, you would have a strategic plan that would have allowed us to align the organizational structure with that strategic plan. I think that's the missing piece here from our perspective and how we move something forward, because as you did mention, functionally it is working, you're meeting your obligations, you are moving forward, but as far as aligning with strategic goals, the current structure could work well, but it could be challenging, right? I think that's hard to say without that overall strategy in place. There's also the need to invest in your senior managers so that they have skills that will cross departments, right? So they have more leadership cross-departmental understanding and collaboration, change management skills that are so essential to moving to any new structure in the future. We need to make sure that everyone has the skills to succeed. And so some of those skills may exist in your organization now, but you need to identify them first so that you can set the organization up for success. So I think not acting now would provide you with some challenges in ever getting to a future structure. I think you need to invest in your people now within the current structure. And a new structure in the future allows the opportunity for succession planning and management. Perhaps there are different roles that require different skill sets or an expansion of someone's skill set where they'll actually be able to move into those positions that are different. So I would say that overall, I mean, in an ideal world, would we have had a strategic plan that, we could focus our recommendations around? Absolutely. But I think you need to still recognize that administrative and mid-level management support is what's needed right now today to even begin to set you up for that success in the future. Mm-hmm.
Just so I'm clear then, but it is possible then to do targeted improvements, pieces of this that are most critical, the lowest hanging fruit, if you like, and to do this strategic. A new strategic direction for the organization, for the corporation in terms of its structure, and do that concurrently, so you address the most pressing issues, and then try to realign more quickly. I mean, is it feasible? Is it feasible to do that strategic planning and get to that place more quickly, or in the short term?
Right. I think that absolutely depends on the resources you have available to allocate towards it. So if you have the resources to look at us getting a strategic planning person in right away and supporting you through that, as well as investing in your current staff complement right now, immediately, and planning that out appropriately and looking at succession planning now, then yes, there's an opportunity for that not to be a 10-year plan, but for that to be, a 4 and 5 year plan. But I think that's up for you and the senior management team to explore a little bit further.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Nothing further. Well, thank you very much, Lindsay, for your work. I know you've spent a great deal of time in our community and got to know it very well. Just a few comments I'll say. I know one of these things, I've been through this exercise just recently at Bruce County where we did a strategic plan and then an org review and a number of recommendations. A much larger organization, mind you, with some 800 employees, but it's been very instructive. One of the things that we all need to understand is we've raised some expectations here with this report for our staff. our staff that think that certainly expect to see something come out of this report, and each of them will have a little different perception, I'm sure, but generally I think they're going to hope to see something that makes this workplace better and makes the community all better, because I know that's all really what we all want. So I ask Council to keep that in mind, because when we go forward with this, I think what we'll do with it now, we'll give it to senior staff, and it'll come back to Committee of the Whole for a discussion on some recommendations and how we implement it. Keep that in mind, because we have raised some expectations, and rightfully so, because we should be challenging our staff to do the best we can. And I thank you for helping us along that path. And with this document, we'll see where it goes, and it should be exciting. Do you want to say anything? Thank you very much. Now, I guess we're going to move. We've got take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll go into close. So I have a motion that I'm going to call this back to order, and I have a motion that's been moved by Councillor Matheson and seconded by Councillor Mike Myatt, that Committee of the Whole move into closed public session in accordance with Bylaw 63-2015, Section 3.8.2b, regarding personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, regarding the organization review report. All in favor? That's carried.